Hey, everybody, I'm Brendan Marcello, 24/7 Sports. Our social distance interview series continues with Bob Bowlsby, Big-12 commissioner. A lot of things to talk about. Bob, first off, I hope you are staying safe and everybody you know is doing so as well. Difficult times here during the coronavirus pandemic. How have you just been handling things on a personal level and tying that to what you're doing professionally?
Well, I'm lucky. I have two of my four children are here in Dallas, so four of my grandchildren are here, and so I get to see them with regularity. Everybody in our family has been healthy, and I've been working from home since the middle of March, which is really unusual for me. Another thing that's unusual is I haven't been on an airplane or haven't been in a hotel for that entire time, so that probably hasn't happened for 35 years, and so it's a very different time. And but I wake up every morning glad that I don't have a fever and that I do have a job. So those things are both good.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast things can change just as far as just the bare essentials, health and being employed in this
All
time.
true.
I want to just get right down to the nitty gritty here quickly. I know the Division I Council on Wednesday is going to vote on possibly allowing some voluntary workouts, voluntary return to campus for some student athletes as early as June 1st. I know the SEC is having a vote Friday to decide whether they'll come back June 1st voluntarily. I know the Big 12 still not allowing team activities at this point. Oklahoma coach Lincoln Riley even said, quote, it was ridiculous that coming back June 1st that early seemed ridiculous to him. Your thoughts, and where is the Big 12 at this moment as far as maybe allowing student athletes to return to campus voluntarily?
Well, our coaches have been really thoughtful, and so have our athletic directors. On the other hand, our board has made it clear that they're going to make the decision on when we'll come back to campus, and that's as it should be. In the case of our ADs, I think we're probably in a good spirit of compromise on it. There are some who would like to be back on June 1st. Some that would like to wait till July 1st, like Coach Riley and Joe Castiglione at Oklahoma. On the other hand, I think, as I say, there's a spirit of cooperation, and I think we're probably trending more towards the middle of the month than we are any other possible date. But the really important component of it is that we have to be ready to have young people come back to campus, whether they're football players or students that are non-athletes, or whether there are student athletes in other sports. You have to have therapeutics in place. You have to have testing in place. You have to know what you're going to do with your sanitization of your weight rooms and your locker rooms and your training rooms. And so, there's a very heavily logistical component to this. And we rely on the advice of our physicians and an organization that we have hired to advise us on infectious disease control. And we're going to do first and foremost what is safe for our student athletes.
So you said, listen, it might be one of those situations where it's almost like a compromise, but obviously health is at the forefront here. You're saying that June 1st, probably out of the picture, but maybe middle of the month could be a conference-wide guideline.
It's not my decision to make, Brandon. Our athletic directors will make recommendations, and our presidents will ultimately decide what's going to happen. But if I were going to handicap it, I would say we're more likely later in the month of June than we are on June 1. But I could be wrong on that.
And speaking with your individual schools, your athletic directors, and the things they're doing to prepare when and if student athletes are around on campus, how's the preparation been for that, whether it's through testing, making sure things are clean, routine cleanings and things of that sort in these shared spaces?
It depends on where you are. This is highly localized. Here in Dallas, I think we had 235 new cases yesterday, including several deaths, unfortunately. In other parts of Texas, it's a non-factor. The same is true across our conference. There are some that are having ample access to testing. Others are having difficulty getting tests. There are those that are well into the disinfectant process, and there are those that are still finding their way. And as I said earlier, we're doing it at the direction of our team physicians and infectious diseases experts on our campuses. We're lucky we've got medical schools on almost all of our campuses, so we have access to good information. There isn't any doubt about that. And so we're just working our way through what is a linear process, and the next decision is the one you've identified. When can we come back and begin to get some semblance of normalcy relative to training? And then, you can't put athletes like football players into a physical game without some reacclimation. And so I think, we're going to need 6 weeks, probably a couple weeks of reacclimation, and then something that looks like a regular preseason camp, about 4 weeks, if we're going to have a chance of starting on Labor Day weekend. And so, as we get to the early part of July and the middle of July, we all need to be hopeful and planning for doing the things that it takes to come back to campus safely. Because I think our year is going to be episodically challenging. I think we're going to have disruptions. I think there are going to be places where a student athlete in some sport at some university tests positive, and then you quarantine a whole team. There are going to be outbreaks on campus. The virus is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And I think all of our health officials and scientists are telling us that this next 18 to 24 months is going to be a bumpy road for public assembly and for the virus. And who knows if it'll come back in the near term. One would think that during the flu and cold and virus season of November through April, the likelihood is fairly high that it's going to be around and it's going to be prevalent, and we're going to have to deal with it. And we will have disruptions. And so we're going to have alternate plans in place to know what we'll do. As an example, if somebody tests positive on Institution A's football team on Wednesday, and Institution B says we're not playing, is it a forfeit? Is it a no contest? Does it get rescheduled? Those things are not resolved yet, but they will be before the start of the season. And we have to have plans A, B, C, D, E, and so on.
As you said, there are going to be disruptions, and I've spoken to medical experts who are working with campuses, and they say the same thing. They just don't see it not being possible to go through an entire year without there being something along those lines. Having said that, you have a disruption. How do you have a Big-12 championship, for that matter, if Team A has only played 4 or 5 or 6 conference games and someone else has played their entire allotment?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and we haven't put our arms around that just yet either. But if you end up thinking, well, the season's going to start 3 weeks late, and we're not going to play conference games or anything but conference games, how do you, if you're the CFP, how do you draw conclusions between and among conferences? It's really difficult without non-conference games. And you think about the postseason with the bowl system and the CFP. Their entire operation is going to be run during the heart of the cold, flu, and virus season. The same way with the basketball programs. I mean, it's easy to forget that 10 weeks ago it was 2 NBA basketball players that tested positive that caused the dominoes to start to fall. So I just think it's we have to have our eyes wide open, and we have to plan for as many contingencies as we can possibly envision, and just know that we're all going to work hard to have it run absolutely true to form. But if it doesn't, we need to be prepared with alternatives.
Are you still determined to have the season start on time, or has your confidence in that waned at all?
Well, it seems to me we're all in a situation where our confidence is a little bit wobbly. Things that we have always counted upon, sports being one of them. It's Saturday, let's load up and go tailgate, and we'll have some brats and we'll watch a good football game. Well, that plan may not come together on all occasions during the course of the fall. Are we going to have fans in the stands? Are we going to have social distancing? Does an 80,000 seat stadium become a 20,000 seat stadium when people have to sit 6 or 8 feet apart? What's the psychology of public assembly? Are people going to go and sit cheek by jowl with people they don't know? You could see a situation where somebody sneezes in row 32 and the section clears. We're not very confident in being able to go out and be in society right now because of the virulence of this pandemic. And so I think it's impossible to forecast what the psychology of this is going to be. I'm 68 years old. If I were a season ticket holder, I'd probably have to think about whether or not I really wanted to go and wait in line next to people to get into the stadium and be in a concession line and be in the vomitories and sit close to people. You just wonder if people's consumption habits will change, and it may be a very good thing for TV ratings because people could choose to stay home and watch what is a very high quality product on television. But that's why I say it's a linear process. I don't think we can make any of those decisions until such time as we start to see when we come back, when we start to see how well we do. We may think we're really good at disinfecting and social distancing and not sharing footballs and not doing things that are risky behavior. And we may find out that we're not as good at it as we think. And so that's actually the experience that states are having that are beginning to ease their restrictions. They're finding that they're seeing an uptick in the infections and in the spread of the infection. And if that happens within your football locker room, it's going to be a challenge.
What's your feeling on some neutral site games? As far as those are scheduled right now, because I'm sure obviously that's going to depend on local municipalities and health experts of whether, neutral site games are even held in their cities. And what do you do if they decide, hey, we're not going to allow these teams in?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and I think there again, it's probably localized. I think some cities will deal with it differently than others. I think anybody that wants to do that is going to have to demonstrate to the participants and to the fans that they can do it safely and that they're not going to put themselves at risk. I think the other thing you might find is you might find game sites changed. You have an outbreak on institution A's campus, and they were supposed to play at A's stadium on Saturday. They may move it to B's stadium and try and avoid cancellation of the game. I think we'll just I think we will be surprised, and we want to minimize those surprises because obviously it's important to the kids, it's important to the universities, it's important to our society that we get back to whatever the new normal is. And I don't think it's going to be the old normal. I think just as 9/11 changed the way we travel with commercial air, we're going to be doing some things different than we've ever done them before. And I think we'll probably be doing them different permanently.
You mentioned maybe having to switch game sites and things because you're just going to have to think on your feet during this entire situation just to be able to play football potentially. Yeah. But let's say a year or two down the road, Oklahoma State's going, we're not going to OU 2 years in a row. How do you deal with that as a commissioner?
Well, that's this is where sometimes you do get to be the benevolent dictator, and it's although commissioners don't have nearly as much authority as a lot of people think we do. But those are the kinds of things that we get involved in, is resolving differences of opinion among our members. And so I think fairness has to be the rule of thumb, and we need to do what's in the best interests of the greater enterprise. And then when push comes to shove, I suppose there's some opportunity for either our board to resolve differences of opinion, or if they want to punt on it, they'll give it to me and I'll have to resolve it. But those are real world things, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if something like that came up.
But your whole situation there is, we want fairness. We want to be able to still have to rotate it. You don't want to do back-to-back years, right?
Well, safety first, and fairness very closely behind.
I wanted to quickly ask, everybody's talking about football right now, but what are the conversations like right now with basketball? Because basketball, starts up in November. You have some preseason stuff going on in October. Scheduling for that, can be crazy because they're traveling all across the country, and sometimes, in the Bahamas and Hawaii and things like that. Yeah. What are the conversations like for men's basketball on the start of a season?
Well, consistent with my comments about the linear nature of this, I have to admit that most of the discussions have been around football and other fall sports. But we all know that basketball is enormously important to America's colleges and universities. We also know we lost the postseason last year. The revenue is critical to many of the 31 conferences. And, it's a part of Americana. I mean, my son fell into deep depression on the Thursday in March when the NCAA tournament was going to start, because he looks forward to it and has since he was 11 years old. And so, it's really part of the fabric of America. And I remember when I was on the men's basketball committee, the Department of Defense actually briefed us on when they were going to begin hostilities in the Middle East, because they wanted us to hold the basketball tournament to make sure that our society seemed just as normal as possible during that awful period. So, it's important, and it doesn't save lives, although I think this year, because we canceled the tournaments and because we canceled the NCAA tournament, I don't think there's any question that we saved lives. I had thousands and thousands of people waded into public assembly facilities during that period in March and early April. The infections would have been greatly expanded. And so I do think we saved lives as a result of those cancellations. So to do that 2 years in a row, notwithstanding the revenue implications of it, for your company, it's a huge part of the annual. There's an awful lot leveraged at CBS with regard to a few of those events. The NFL certainly, but the Masters and college basketball are probably the big three.
I wanted to get away from the COVID discussion, because I know that just bogs your day down, and it's a very important issue, obviously, and you got to be focused on it. But I wanted to ask, the Big-12, every year everybody goes, Texas is back, or they see a big game and Texas wins. But how important is it to the Big-12 that Texas, quote unquote, is back, that they're winning games in a contention for the conference championship and the playoff, just one financially, but also branding and the viability of the conference? Because OU's been up there, of course, but there's always good to have a couple of teams that are always in the mix, as we've seen from other conferences.
Yeah, well, and we've been fortunate. We've had good teams. Baylor and TCU tied for our conference championship a few years ago, and Baylor's been very good recently. There's some. I think top to bottom, our league is second to none. You never have a week off. Matt Campbell's done a great job at Iowa State. You think about what Mike Gundy has done over the years and the number of games that he's won. It's the Kansas State legacy of Bill Snyder is unbelievable. So there's a lot of success in the league. But Texas is a bell cow. There isn't any doubt about it. They're in the second most populated state in the country. They're the flagship university of the state of Texas, and it's they're in the state capital. I just think having Texas be highly competitive is important in not just football but everything. And Chris Del Conte is as good an athletic director as there is any place in the country. And I think that Tom Herman has come in and been smart about the way he's building the program, and they are back to recruiting well. And I think that they'll be in the conversation going forward, and they have been the last 2 years. They've been very competitive. They just haven't. They could have just as easily won 2 years ago in our championship game, and so I think your premise is that the Big 12 is better when Texas is highly competitive. I couldn't disagree with that at all. Having said that, I love having good balance between all our members because it makes for great games on Saturday. And then we've been the number one rated RPI basketball conference, I think 6 out of the last 7 years. So we play at a high level in a whole bunch of sports, and aspirationally we want to win national championships. And whether it's OU or Texas or Baylor in football or somebody else, we haven't won a national championship for a few years, and aspirationally that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I guess there's perception. There's always perception, and OU's been in the playoffs several times here, and just haven't been able to break through. And as a result of the Big 12, what do you hear from the outside folks when they talk about the Big 12 just never being able to win that championship? And what's your take on that?
Well, in the semifinals, the Georgia-Oklahoma game was one of the classics of all times. It was a great football game, and OU was ahead 14 or 17 at the half, and so it was a great comeback by Georgia. But I don't think there's any question that Oklahoma has been good enough. They just haven't gotten over the hump. When you get into the semifinals, everybody you play is good, and you're gonna have to beat them. They aren't going to beat themselves. And so, but we what does it take to do it? We need to coach well. We need to recruit well. We need to develop players. We're in one of the great recruiting hotbeds in the state of Texas, and we haven't always kept the best recruits at home. And so that's obviously an important component of this. But there hasn't been much of anybody winning the national championship until this year when LSU did, except for Clemson and Alabama. So an awful lot of the aggregation of winning at that level has been between two schools. And so, it's we need to change that. It's Greg Sankey is a very close friend and colleague of mine, and so is John Swafford. We collaborate a lot this time of year, but believe me, we want to do everything we can to beat each other's brains out the rest of the time. And we've had a good run in the postseason. I think we're 13-7 or something like that in the postseason, and have played all of the other conferences head to head. So we have good coaches, we have good players. We need to get on a roll, and some year we will.
I know this is probably not on your mind at all, but listen, conference expansion realignment's always a hot topic no matter what. And the Big 12 is quote unquote not the Big 12, just from the number of schools. But what is your vision? What are your thoughts about the future of the Big 12 and whether you should seek expansion or some type of realignment in the future?
Well, the Big 12 has 10 and the Big 10 has 14. So, some of us are just numerically challenged, but, I don't see a lot of realignment on the horizon. It's last time around, it was due to cable TV capturing cable households, and the cable universe is shrinking, and it's going to continue to shrink. And so I just, that as a motivation is unlikely to be there. The other thing is if you bring people in without the advantage of capturing cable households or some other form of revenue, all you're doing is dividing the money more ways. And so I really don't see another round of realignment. I think it's we're going to be in a steady state for a while here.
Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlsby, thanks for joining us here on Social Distance.
Great to be with you.